Hello, everybody. We're up and running. I see the attendees are starting to flow in. We have a very interesting webinar that we're gonna talk about today, and I've been looking forward to this one, maybe even a little bit more than some of the others. This one, we're gonna have our co-host. I think it's his third time, maybe somewhere in that area. Is going to be Peter Krause, and what we're going to talk about today is using, maybe stitching together quite a few of our other webinars and putting this all into one thing of self-coaching and self-coaching and instructing yourself, instructing your teammates, but mainly yourself. Is how do you look at put into play, all the information that we've talked about. Plus, Peter has some new stuff he wants to throw at us as well, where we talk about self-coaching and using this AiM sports data for that. So a very, very valuable webinar, I think, that we're going to see today. So it'll be good. A couple of housekeeping things is, as we go, we absolutely are hoping for some good questions and answers about this topic as we're going. If you press on the Q&A button that's in your little Zoom bar, it'll open up a panel. And that's your question and answer box. Make sure if you're going to ask something that wants to be answered during this webinar or in our document that we always attach to our YouTube videos in the description box below later, make sure you type it into the question and answer box. You also have a chat box. That chat box is for, maybe there's a question in there, maybe you're just making comments, maybe you're saying hi to everybody like everybody is right now, and I love that. Make sure that those kind of things are in that box and questions are in the questions and answers. One other thing with the chat box is people are watching that too, and there's a to button down at the bottom right where you type in your message. Make sure that you change that from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. You have to change it one time, and then for the rest of this session, it will go out to everybody. If you leave it at the default at all panelists, you may answer a question, or people are kind of watching a little bit of a thread and they don't see any of your comments. Only the panelists that we have behind the scenes here will be seeing those. So keep that in mind. Change that right now, and then from then on, you're gonna see everything you want. Make sure you change that all panelists to all panelists and attendees. We do have some folks that are our normal group of very smart, very highly technical folks, AiM folks that are in the background here. We have Cameron from our Roanoke office is going to be answering your questions and answers. If there's some of them that they can answer real quickly, boy, they're typing just super quickly behind the scenes, and you'll see some of those questions if there's something he can answer real quickly, him or the rest of them, they do those in the question and answer box or in the chat. And so Cameron's from our Roanoke office is doing that. We've got also from Roanoke, we've got Brick. He's going to be over there answering some of your questions as well. And we've got Robbie from our Roanoke office. Robbie is doing the same. I'm sorry, from our Lake Elsinore office. He's doing the same thing, and as well as Robbie is prepared, and he'll be throwing some links into the chat box. So as Peter and I are talking about something, Robbie will be throwing up some links that you can click on and grab some downloadable data, some links into the YouTube, videos or something like that. Now that chat box goes away at the end, so if you want some of those, make sure you click them and then save them to your local computer. But so keep that in mind. And then any links he sends in there, we tend to put in the description box in the YouTube video when it's uploaded onto YouTube, the recorded version of this when it goes onto YouTube. So keep that in mind. That's just a little bit of housekeeping stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, we're going to be building on some of the ones we've done already. If you're watching this later, this recorded version, all of our webinars are on the YouTube site where you found this one. So if we mention something back that we've already talked about and you weren't there, go ahead and check them out. So the first thing we want to talk about then is get Peter introduced. And let's see if I can get that to work. Let me share that again. Let me see if I can get this to work. Let's stop the share. Let's try that, and let's reshare it. I can't get the PowerPoint to run. Let's try that. Wouldn't you know it, right? Huh? Let me.
It worked perfectly. Just not 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. Yeah, just the way it works sometimes. Let me try to share in a different way and see if I can make that work there. There it goes. Okay, well, I've just shared it in a slightly different way, but hopefully it'll work out. Peter's been a longtime friend. I've known Peter for probably 8 or 10 years now. We've done some on-site seminars at his place, 2 a year for quite a while. So he helps me with some different things that we chat about even offline. So Peter, if you give a little bit of an introduction of yourself, and then we will move on into the full presentation.
Thank you, Roger. You know, this whole webinar series has been built into a small community. I mean, we have regular people here, and that's what I do. Is I work with the track day, driver's education, club racing community to help drivers help themselves. I sold a prep shop business that I had for 25 years, working on Italian cars, which guaranteed job security for sure. To turn into a club level driver performance analyst, a coach, before it was a thing. I bought and built a commercial facility here at Virginia International Raceway, which is where I'm speaking from now, the Driver Development Center. And I use simulators, and I hung my hat as a little bit of a geek on objective measures to measure driver performance. And instead of my opinion or my feeling, I use this objective measure to really try to make sure that that we're talking about the same thing. And what I do is enlist people with me, and we have a conversation about it. It's a wonderful deal. I am a multi-line data and video dealer, but AiM is front and center with its support for club level drivers, which is huge. And obviously we're talking primarily about cars today, but this equipment is good for a lot of different things, and a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today can be used for other vehicles.
Perfect. You had something you might have wanted to share. Let me see if I can make everybody's picture a little bit bigger of Peter. Let me see if I can stop the share. Maybe everybody can see Peter a little bit bigger now.
So I'm gonna show you that I'm a practical guy. So I have my nuts and bolts tie on, because that's what we're doing, is we're going back to the nuts and bolts of everything to try to help you turn squiggly lines into action plans. The other thing I wanted to show you was I work a lot, not only with drivers and clients and friends and customers, but also with other professionals, colleagues, also volunteer, a huge cadre of excellent volunteer instructors for a large number of MARC Club driving instruction and high performance drivers education. And what I wanted to show you today is something that, this is a new product from AiM. It's called the Track Day Car Kit. It is a aluminum billet mount with a camera and a Solo 2TL mounted on it with a Ram suction cup mount. This device, plugged into an OBD2, will be able to do everything we are talking about today, and it can be installed in about 15 seconds and removed in about 15 seconds. It is a superb device. It's less than $110, and it's been something I've been waiting on for a long time. I think it's going to be really, really good for a lot of people who are trying to help others utilizing this technology with a quick easy in, easy out installation.
Perfect.
Thank you.
A new tool, kind of, oops, I done probably, let me see if it's working. I went back to the old way of sharing it. Let me, as we're finishing up with the introduction, let me throw a poll out, and it's the one we tended to start with typically with these. And if you would just pick, you could pick multiples. And boy, I'd just love to. It helps us understand where we're heading with these webinars. What devices from AiM do you own? What do you use? What are you using that is gathering this information that you'd love to come to these webinars and take a look at? I've gotten this question a couple times for a while, but mainly the last few days is I've mentioned that we're going to have some new co-hosts coming in. We'll have, certainly the old ones will continue to give because they've been super popular and they've enjoyed it as well, as much as we have. So, but I had filled our calendar all the way up through the end of May, quite some time ago. So we have some new co-hosts that we're going to be feeding into the system, and you're going to see some new names here starting in June. So we are going to continue with these probably at this exact time and day, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to continue these all the way through June, and then we'll try to tweak and see where the where you guys wish to see them, right? As people are hopefully getting back to work and getting out and doing things, maybe this isn't the right time, but I think it is so far. And the numbers are showing that we're still holding true. So we're going to continue with this all the way through the month of June. So keep that in mind, put that onto your calendar, and be ready for not only the same hosts that co-hosts we've had, but some new ones as well. I appreciate everybody taking a look at and filling us in on those polls. That helps us on these new co-hosts that that either we have asked or they have contacted us and asked to be co-hosts as well. So you're going to see some new people based on a lot of this polling information and stuff that we continue to hear. So I'm going to end that poll right there, and we'll have a couple three more before it's over with as well. So with that, Peter, I'm going to give the remote control to you, and let's see how it works. I'm a little nervous, of course, always, and so you should be able to go over there and move up a slide, see if it works for you. Look at that! Look at that!
Amazing magic.
My life is good. So go ahead, Peter. Looking forward to what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is an overview. What we're talking about today is a philosophy, a methodology, a short, quick, clean way of zooming in on specific information that will help drivers do better. There is no car that cannot be driven quicker by somebody else, but by examining the information that is collected and really getting to the point where you can pick very, very tight and targeted things to work on by improving the quality of every driver input. You can go faster, basically with less risk. Much of what we're talking about is good for self-coaching. I mean, the first order of business is to train yourself how to do this, and the best subject to do that with is yourself. So that is one of the reasons why we're talking about self-coaching, but also in this day and age, in this post-pandemic return to the track, we're going to be really trying very hard to leverage the power of this data for one driver or one instructor to help a student or another driver, and this is a good way to do it. Your common goal is always to solve the problem. How do you go faster? But not only how do you go faster, but how do you do it with less risk? Nobody wants to crash their car. That's not fun. So everything I'm always going to tell you is going to be simple, be targeted, and be incremental. That's very, very important. So then the next thing is where I am a little bit different from a lot of other coaches and instructors is I'm not into the head thing. I mean, I think for that preparation, there are plenty of other people. Ross Bentley does a wonderful job. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people out there. There are a lot of pro drivers that are very good at fitness, all that sort of thing. I call myself less than a coach, more of a driver performance analyst. And that is what we're talking about today is examining the performance of the driver and picking one or two things for the next session. Drivers are a funny breed. If you give them three things to work on, invariably they go out onto the circuit and they forget all three. But if you give one, maximum of two goals for the next session, they can generally keep that in their mind. So it's super important. One of the things you need to do with this technology is make sure you don't go down the rabbit hole. It is easy to add channels. It's easy to click on measures. It's really important. But the issue really is about trying to remain focused, remain tight. There's not often much time between sessions. So you need to get to the point and go. And we're going to talk about that in our review of the slides. The final principle is always KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. It is super, super important to do that.
I thought that was
Um,
kiss the trophy girl at the end because you were fast.
well, that's the
I
goal.
misread that. Yeah. Okay.
That is the goal. So, so I'm going to always start, and I've said this before, and I'm super excited about Race Studio 3 analysis because this is going to allow you to do this in a tightly integrated way and give you better context and allow you to do a better job of making sure that you don't go down the wrong road and come to erroneous conclusions by just looking at the data. You have, in fact, the video. So if you do have video, it is super, super important that you just do a quick review with a quick lap before you open up the data and take a look. You're doing a quick check. All you're doing is just making sure that the car placement is not fundamentally wrong, that the gear selection is not an afterthought. Gear downshiftings are not occurring after turn in. Upshiftings are crisp and clean and they're quick on the straightaways and they're consistent. You want to make sure that the throttle behavior is good. If the throttle is present on the video, the intelligent video of having measures on the background, it's always important to see it begin and continue. You want to make sure that the person that you're looking at their video, that they're handling traffic well. It is super important to be, I believe in ethical racing and ethical driving on the track. I think it's important to be friendly to other people. I think it's important to be aware. My friend Ron Zitza from Florida of Zotz Racing has something he calls 360 awareness. You want to look at the video and you want to make sure that that is, something that you are able to observe of the person that you're reviewing, whether it's yourself or somebody else. Make sure that you're not surprised. That's a big thing. And then finally, consistency. Are they hitting every apex? Are they consistent in their car placement? Realistically, you only need to look at the fast lap in the beginning, and then you really need to go on to the next thing. So here we're developing a methodology to identify low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit, I mean, honestly, the goal is not necessarily to make a great driver greater or a good driver great. That's not what we're doing between sessions. All we want to do is jettison the 80% they're doing reasonably well, find targeted and actionable opportunities for improvement. All right. People are creatures of habit. Drivers are creatures of habit. So if they have an error or a delay or a crisis in confidence that's affecting their control input timing and amplitude, then they have it all over the track and they have it between tracks. So I would say that you're looking not for track specific stuff as long as the car position is relatively good, which you've already validated by looking at the video. You're always looking to reinforce the best execution of fundamental skills. That sounds funny, but again, if you improve the quality of every driver control execution, you can go faster with less effort and less risk. Now, I must say that having watched James Clay's excellent presentation, the very first one on the time variance and finding opportunities for improvement using just a simple speed versus distance graph, a comparison between 2 laps. This is fundamental. It is really important. It is also wonderful to see what James Colborn did. And James, I have to give him huge props because he is not only a scientist and an engineer, but he also has the perfect balance between knowledge and self-deprecation. Self-deprecation is being humble enough to say, man, I didn't do a very good job there. I'm looking at my data. I think I can do a better job here, and I'm going to focus on this. And that is the methodology he uses, and I am going to reinforce today. Pre-event prep is required. It's a massive time-saving tool if you get your stuff ready. Prep with just 3 profiles, 3 different views of information. You know, it's really important to see that because it's really going to help. And we're going to build on what James Colborn did really, really well Tuesday today. Load these GPS map channels that James talked about beforehand and get familiar with your own data doing this, because it's super, super important that it is possible to coach Daytona and Sebring winners with just GPS measures. And so I'm telling you right now, I've done it. I've done it for a dozen years. I have people that pay me a tremendous amount of money to distill a tremendous amount of information to 1 or 2 action plans for the very next session. And that's what I'm suggesting you do. Mass are an objective measure of a subjective valuation. So mass can add numbers, real improvement in terms of quantitative improvement to what we think of as smoothness and these abstract concepts that we only talk about in the classroom, but really need to be put into place in the car. So the next thing is really to make sure that you are looking at the basics. Transitions with pedal inputs need to be relatively quick. Yes, there are periods where you have no pedal, and that is when the G sum or the demands on the car are so great that the smallest change in a control input will cause the balance of the car to change, and that you can feel that. So the limit for the purpose of our discussion today is when the smallest control input makes a difference. Very, very important. So you want to see that sawtooth from wide open throttle to brake. We want to see V's in the V minimums at slow corners and U's in fast corners in terms of the speed versus distance graph. We want to look at shifting. We want to make sure nobody's lazy. We want to make sure people are thinking of everything they do in the car and doing it as well as they can every time. So straight line downward stroke on the speed versus distance. If it's not, it indicates a crisis in confidence, just like the speed up. If the speed is not clear, then what happens is if the speed is not unbroken, it means that people have a crisis in confidence. Everyone tries to go quicker into slow corners. So sometimes you can overcook it so much going into the corner that you can't go to power because the car is not pointed in the right direction. And that is the cause of some hockey stick, which is a downward stroke and then a gentler stroke before the rise in speed. That can be a cause for hockey stick speed traces at corner entry. That usually is accompanied with a double bump, where the person gets their braking done soon, gets back on the, realizes, hey, I got to go back to power if I'm not able to be on the brake anymore. And then they see a little bit of a bump up in speed, and then they realize, you know what, the car's not pointing in the same direction. I got to get out of it, tuck the nose in, and get going again. One big thing I see a lot is people braking in multiples for what should be a single brake zone. Perfect example, end of the back straight at VIR. You can't see the turn in, so you're gonna brake early, and then you're gonna pop over the hill and you're gonna go, oh, I slowed too much. I'm gonna let off the brake, and then, oops, I gotta slow it down to get the car to begin to turn. So the goal is to eliminate multiple brake zones that are close together if you can. So it's super, super important. Stepped deceleration, this idea of letting off the gas and then gassing it, or braking hard and then releasing the brake and rolling distance and then braking again. Get rid of that wasted time and that wasted effort. Braking best practices, super, super important. This is just a review of the channels that you are going to see, or some of the channels that you're going to see on. Now, working off of James' excellent work and Roger's terrific presentation Tuesday, I use slightly different values, and part of the reason I use these slightly different values is I've used this across a variety of different logging systems, across a variety of different cars from Spec Miata all the way to LMP1 cars. So I'm going to tell you that for my purposes, and I do recommend this, anything greater than minus 0.3 G longitudinal G, or more than 0.3 of a G forward, is definitively braking for almost every car. Because off throttle with a high compression V8 can register as high as minus 0.28 G. So, and then of course there are aero cars like F1 cars that you let off the gas and it's 1 G, minus 1 G. I mean, you don't even need to touch the brake. Throttle on is a little more sensitive. We were at 0.05. I'm going to say 0.01. I'm going to say any acceleration at all would be any forward thrust means that the person is on the gas. So that's all I really wanted to say was we're going to use this because this is a tool that you need in your toolbox no matter what system or hardware you have.
Peter, jump back to that slide real quickly. I want to make an offer here, and when with the last webinar that we did with James, I also said at this point where, hey, if you want some math channels that we've kind of built, including this subset of what you're seeing here, a smaller subset, you'll get my email will be up on the screen here in a little bit. Roger at aimsports.com. Send me an email and ask for the math channel package. I think on Tuesday evening, I sent it out to over 50 people that had watched. Many of you are watching this and don't need it again, but if you're watching this one or you're catching it in replay, let me know and I'll email you out some good documentation, a spreadsheet with all of the math channels and all of this stuff set up. So perfect one. And I had one other question that's in the question box is why do we eliminate corners from coasting? You notice that our coast on channel there, it shows you're coasting if you're not either accelerating or you're not braking or you're not in a corner. And it's a little bit of a story with Peter is when I first started doing seminars at Peters, he hated that word coasting, right? And I think he's embraced it a little bit more. It's probably still not perfect, and it's not perfect for me either. But the people always get this word of coasting, and it's only when you're not on the throttle or not on the brake. Well, there is so much more that the car is doing that, boy, if you are, as Peter just mentioned a minute ago, if you are G'd up as such that you're using maximum amount of lateral G's or the transition with the G sum, where the G sum shows it between longitudinal and lateral, corner should be part of disqualifying an area. If you're not on either pedal and yet you're at 1.5 G's, you're not ghosting. You're you're very busy. So that's why the question that we had up there was shown that that's why we include the lateral G into the coasting equation. So thank you, Peter. And anybody wants these, make sure you drop me an email now or when the webinar is over.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation, Roger. That's really good. I'm gonna tell you that all drivers bleed red. Okay, all drivers bleed red. By that I mean all drivers put their pants on, put their suit on the same way. Okay, the difference between good drivers and great drivers and amateurs and pros and drivers education drivers and racing drivers really has to do more with preparation, practice, understanding of the basics and fundamentals that really make a difference. The pros get to do it more and more often. One of the nice things is here we are looking at James's entry into Copse. He talked about it a little bit. The track map, I try to keep the number of measures on the screen to a minimum. I'd really rather not have more than 3, but in this case I have 4. But I love heat maps, and I encourage everyone to use the GPS map and put it on the analysis window every time, because until you're very familiar with the shape of a track, you don't really know where a lot of this stuff is happening. And all of this is dynamically linked. As Roger said before repeatedly, it's all connected together, which is wonderful. And we can click in different places and see what's going on. And I'm not using live data because I want to blast through here, but we're looking for first sustained areas of VMIN. We see that. I can actually show you that right here. Oops, I'm sorry, I messed up.
I'm sorry, you can get back there easy. There you
go.
Back. It's on its way. There you
go. So what I want to do is I just want to say that areas of extended sections of the same speed is really important. I'm going to ask Roger to explain just shortly another tool that I use frequently, which is the delta tool. And that is something that gives very, very valuable information to put a number to a shape. Roger.
That Delta tool right here that Peter was pointing at, it's a tool that a good number of people know about a little bit more nowadays, but there are still quite a few that don't understand it. And that little red triangle is, you click on it and it's waiting for two things. It's waiting for an anchor point and a measure point, and which Peter has done in this example here. So he has clicked right here and then clicked the second time right here. What the software has done is drawn a couple of lines for you, and then what Peter's looking for here is how much time did the driver spend basically at the same mile per hour, right? That pause that he was talking about a moment ago. And the result of that, where you can actually see it, is up here in the top of the measures graph screen. And you can see the first value here is the position of that second click. You know, we're at about what, 900 and, you know, you're moving the mouse there. Peter, don't move the mouse. So you're sitting at about 885 feet, and which is 5.7 seconds into the lap. But in the parentheses here is the value where you are the distance between. It's 1.862 seconds in between the two clicks, and it's 249.801 feet. So the ability of you to know how long you coasted and the number of feet that you coasted is what the delta function can give you, plus many other things. But that's how the delta works, and that's what the way Peter is showing it here. Peter, while we're doing that, let's do one more poll. The next poll that I'd like to do that's in here is we have GPS channels that we're talking about. Of course, some of you may have some other channels, but it might be interesting. How much do you feel that GPS data limits your analysis? This is a poll we gave last Tuesday as well, and it was kind of interesting. So I wanted to do it one more time with this group. Boy, it's kind of cool that GPS, you know, the Solo and virtually every AiM device that you have nowadays will have a GPS sensor attached to it or built into it. And boy, is that where I'm at right now with my data analysis? Is this giving me what I need, or do I feel I need some more? That you know, do I really want more sensors on top of that? Or I don't know. I'm still kind of learning how this whole thing works. So, kind of an interesting poll to see where you as the participants here are seeing and learning what's available to you. So I'm going to end that poll in about 5 more seconds. So if you haven't clicked on it, do that, and then I'm going to share the results for you, just so you can get an idea of where people kind of are. They are anonymous, by the way. All of our these polls, nobody that's watching this is going to be able to see what you voted. So I'm going to end that poll, and let's share the results. Results, Peter is always interested in watching these as they come up as well. The number one result is, yes, I really want some more sensors, you know, but the numbers are very close. It's 38% of you that voted in the poll, and 36% say no, I don't feel like I've maximized what I've got yet, you know, with the GPS based stuff, and then 27% of you saying, you know, I don't know yet, you know, let me play with my data, let me learn a little bit more from Peter and the rest of these co-hosts, and see where we're going. So thanks for the poll. I'll get that out of everybody's way, and Peter, you ought to be able to go ahead and grab that back.
Super. So one of the things that I'm going to say is I use other channels: driver control input, steering angle, throttle position, brake pressure, actual physical controls, as a validation of these GPS map channels. I'm suggesting here easily you could substitute perhaps this throttle on and the GPS you know, inverse longitudinal G to say that. So the idea here in this delta is we have basically a break off, which is occurring, you know, 3/4 of the way through that section at the beginning of the delta. And then we have throttle on that occurs 249 feet later. So we're not just looking at the speed. We're not just looking at the G sum. And James has, you know, made an excellent explanation that Copse corner is probably one of the most intimidating high-speed corners in the world. And all you got to do is watch an F1 YouTube of people going through Copse. I remember Nigel Mansell and Senna going side by side through there. It's pretty crazy. You can see that his G sum begins, you know, at the 1G max, but then he's able to actually sustain towards the end closer to 1.3, I'm going to say 1.25 sustained. So the idea here is he has room to grow. And that's what's really good about the whole thing. We have basically a virtual throttle and a virtual brake, and that's all we're trying to work on today is that low-hanging fruit. The second corner, and this was a difference that he clearly said, look, I'm coming up to speed on this circuit. I'm not absolutely sure how long the corner is. This is not quite a 180-degree sweeper, but I want to see a shorter delay between the end of braking to throttle on. This is something that really, really makes a difference. Ross Bentley and I talk about this a lot. Roger and I talked about this before the presentation. If you can raise your average speed through the slow areas of the track, you are going to gain more time than if you do that on the fast sections. And you're going to do it with less risk. So right now, using the delta function, we are looking at maggots, this corner right, this section here on the track, and we know that it is taking him, I know this because I'm using this virtual brake on and virtual throttle on, we know that he's traversing 212 feet, almost 2.5 seconds without, a lot of pedal and no change in speed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pat James on the back because in the very next session during the race, he did better than half that. Okay. So all of a sudden he's tightening up the end of braking to the beginning of throttle, and we can see it and we can put a number to it. And all of a sudden, here's quantitative, qualitative proof of improvement. And this is important because 9 times out of 10, I will debrief a driver that comes back in and they will say, man, I was doing better. I'm sure I was quicker. And I don't understand why my lap time's not any better. Well, if you do this sort of analysis, you can tell where and why that occurs. That's another great thing that Roger talks about. So this is, again, an overview slide from a previous presentation. James Clay, who I have inestimable respect for as really a driver that has propelled himself, really coached himself to the highest level of professional motorsport, and he's working really, really well. But you can see the consistency of the areas in deceleration. This is just GPS longitudinal G. It's super simple, but you see basically for fast or slow corners, he's decelerating the car, slowing the car roughly at the same level. He's not allowing the subjective question in his mind to influence how hard he pushes the brake. He just pushes the brake at the same level and alters the timing of it to get done and get rid of the speed that he thinks he needs. No question in his mind. So we're looking now at the G-Sum corner entry. We saw this on James' entry, James Colborn's entry into Copse, where we saw actually a pretty good droop. Here we actually see a little bit of less of a percentage. I mean, we have right now proof positive that James Clay is decelerating at minus 1.2 G. We also know that at the very end, he's bending the car into the corner. This heat map is the G-Sum colored with the G-Sum measure. Super important. We see that everything above 1.1 G-Sum is red. Okay, everything from 0.99 to 1.0 is orange. So we have not only the strip chart, but we have the heat map, and we're looking at the color. And if you're explaining stuff to people, if you're trying to coach somebody else, having this ability to show you where on the track this stuff is happening on the strip chart is huge, because then people can put it to use. So it's really nice to see null, when we actually go up the uphill S's, which is right this section where you're constantly changing direction back and forth. that corresponds with this section where the G-sum actually has to go through a center period where there's no forces acting on the car. But G-sum is a huge, important, very important measure. So what I'm going to ask you to do so far, we've been looking at these huge whole lap things. I want you to zoom in and focus on one individual corner entry or two individual corner entries, or in the case of VIR, which is a huge track, divide the track up into 3 parts and focus on one at a time. Here we have, again, the delta section where not only his virtual brake goes off right here at you know, what, 1,610 feet into the lap, and then his throttle goes on here at about 1,725 feet into the lap, and the speed differential is only 1 mile an hour. But you know what is really critical here? This high sustained G-sum with the no brake pedal and no throttle, period. So for 150 feet, he's maxed. He is maxed at 1.18 G, and he is not his variation over this 150 feet is not more than 0.02 in the G-sum. So we know the car is on the limit, and we know that he can't go to more. If you look at your data and you look at other people's information, I guarantee you this is not the norm, but this is the goal. No dithering. We want to get our words in. We love that stuff. It's super, super important, okay? It is, you know, one of the things that I think is important to realize is the heat map colors have a different purpose than the strip chart colors. The heat map colors are channel generated through a range. So you pick one channel and you say red is a lot and blue is not a lot. So in this particular heat map on the left-hand side, we see that the car is not stressed. The tire contact patch is not stressed on the blue sections, especially the dark blue. It is very stressed on the bright red sections. Now on the strip charts, we're using blue because we can see it for speed. We're using green because it's forward, go, throttle. We're using red because it's brake, slow down. And we're using purple for another measure, which I think is hugely important. This whole idea of brake speed is super, super important. And the reason why the brake speed is important is because it shows you a window into the confidence of the driver's mind, okay? The driver is very, very confident who uses the same initial application speed and then does not vary it throughout the brake zone. So here we are attaching a quantitative value to a qualitative assessment. And I'm just going to put in a little plug for a great friend of mine, Ray Phillips of Precision Driving Analytics. He builds match channels and profiles for people who don't want to do it themselves. And it's super, super important to do that and really leverage that. And he uses a complicated match channel with throttle position and brake that shows you brake aggression or brake release. And so these are important, but just working off of GPS measures, just working off the stuff that James has shared with you and Roger has shared with you and the whole crew, this is sweet brake speed right here, baby. This is really, really nice. Every time he is just bang, vertical line in initial application, and then a gradual ebb, you know, of that speed. So he goes up high, he finishes it, and then he stays there. There's no question in his mind.
Pretty impressive, isn't it? It'll be interesting to see some of for those of you watching, you know, to build this math channel. I did see a comment about talk about it a little bit more. Peter was all over that. It's included in the math channels that you may that you may get from us. Here's another example, and it's simply just the derivative of your GPS longitudinal G. So it's a fairly easy one to make, and it is still just based on the GPS channels themselves. So I'd like to, while we're here, I'd like to do one more poll and talk about the math channels. Since you've chatted about them a little bit, the how do you feel about math channels and Race Studio 2 analysis? And this is just you personally. Where are you at with the process? Do we want to continue to look at them in more webinars? That, that's how I'm using this poll. And or do we want to kind of back off on a little bit, or just continue kind of the level we are? Or what are they? Kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying you don't know much about them, right? I don't know if there's a feature, but I know there's a feature about math channels, but I don't know. But that's about it. I'd like to know more. But I find them confusing. That's certainly where I have been in the past with them as well. I'm hoping to see more, but I'm not a mathematician, or I love them and use them all of the time. So take a look at that, and we'll run that thing for about another 10 seconds or so. Peter, while you were finishing that last slide, you mentioned Ray Phillips, and Ray is one of the ones, by the way, since you mentioned him. One of the fellows I've been talking about. He'll probably be doing three webinars, co-hosting on 3 webinars in June. So you mentioned him. He's a smart guy. He's a nice guy. Enjoy chatting with him occasionally. So I look forward to that. So math channels levels. Let's end that polling, and let's take a look at those results. Let's share the results with you, just so everybody can see them. The number one at 50% of those of you that voted. I'm hoping to use them more, but I'm not a mathematician. So you're using them a little bit, and you see the power of them, and they're pretty cool things, and you're ready to use a little bit more. 24%, I love them and use them all the time. So that's in second place. And third, fairly close. I'd like to know more, but I find them confusing. So we'll continue to study the data from the polls and understand where we're heading with some of those. So that's pretty cool. So we'll do that. And Peter, let's go ahead and take it back over, and we'll go from there.
Super. Well, thank you, Roger. So. One of the great things is important to see here, and this is mitigated somewhat by the fact that there was the traditional United Kingdom liquid sunshine affecting the coefficient of friction between James's tires and the track. But we do see some frenetic, that is the Merriam-Webster dictionary word of the day, frenetic brake speed present in this graphical representation. So what this is showing is the speed of change, the speed of change of the control input. And it is super important to realize, oops, did I mess that up? I did.
It's okay.
All right. So we're just gonna go back one to
you were there.
James.
You were there. I'm sorry.
Going back to James, and I'm just saying, look, here is what our goal is, with the driver fully confident and a good track with a good friction surface, and super important. So that's all we're looking for, is to clean that up and make it as calm and decisive as possible. That's the most important thing. Lastly, our last data slide of the day, basically the first webinar presentation by James Clay was using time flip, basically at the bottom, to identify areas of opportunities for improvement in comparing two drivers. Here, all I wanted to say was, using these simple math channels with no other information from the car, you can see that our red car not only released the throttle early, but also began the brake early, and incidentally finished at the same point as the blue car, but started early. We can see that the brake speed was very similar, but we also see more dithering by the red car at the very end. And we also see that stepped decline in the speed trace, indicating two separate brake zones where the blue car is doing a much better job of distributing the braking across the entire zone. But right now, looking at the map on the left-hand side, this entire section where starting from the beginning of the plot, which is right here, and the beginning of the graph, which is right here, to this point, which is where we have the cursor, this point where the car position is now, the red car has lost almost 9/10 of a second, and the car hasn't even gone into the corner yet. So this is really low-hanging fruit for the red car driver, and this is exactly the kind of information you want with additional channels that validate your supposition that the driver is coming off the throttle early and braking early. Not only are you guessing, you actually have a statistical readout of the forces acting on the car that can give you with pretty good certainty what is happening with your foot in the bottom. So to finish up, implement an action plan. Make it tight, make it simple, and keep it short. I have a really tough time doing that because I like to talk a lot, but develop a 10-minute review. You're reviewing the information. You're evaluating and looking for low-hanging fruit. Then finally, you select the goal, not more than 2, and equip yourself, if you're coaching yourself, or the driver you're working with, if you're helping somebody else, with not more than 2 goals. Examine speed changes for certainty and decisiveness. Super important. All you need is a graph, a strip chart of speed versus distance for that. Minimize the time and distance covered at the slowest speeds, in the slowest corners. It's going to give you the greatest return, but don't overcook it, because that can delay throttle application. The speed line comes up later and you've lost what you've gained going in. Minimize the coast time under the G-sum. This is why these math channels are really, really important, and why the relationship between the channels is doubly important, because we can't make a supposition based on only one measure. Look for the quality of the brake speed, not just the deceleration number. So these math channels have leveraged basic information into much more powerful tools that you can use to coach yourself and other people. Maths, particularly these GPS switches, on or off, not a particular number, but on or off, they save time. And no one has as much time as they want at the track. We've all been moldering, sitting at home, having our butts glued to the seat. I know everybody's ready to get back out. I'm listening to race cars drive around on Virginia International Raceway right now as the Dan River rises to cover turn 1 this weekend. We're under flood watch. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But the idea here is, when you get back out there, be ready with the plan, utilize these things, and you're really going to make a difference. Roger, anything else?
No, perfect. And I think we've covered a lot of the questions as we went. I really appreciate Peter coming on here. I've seen it mentioned in the chat a couple of times, the passion, that people love, the passion that a lot of coaches, and Peter certainly has it in spades, that they just love what they do, and it's and it comes across in the video as well, which is kind of cool. Pretty neat stuff. So perfect. If let me click on this, and I think we've covered most of them, Peter. There's a couple there. Why don't you look over those real quickly? I'm going to start the one more poll that we'll get some results from, and then we'll answer any final questions and kind of close this thing up just a little bit. This one here is, what are your top 3 topics? I mean, you could vote for more, and can't stop you, but your top 3 topics. This has also been one that we've been leaning heavily on our choices of upcoming webinars. So I look at these results every single afternoon after we get done with these. I take a look at the reports, and we try to help figure out where we're heading with the next topics. While we haven't changed too many of the presenters, the co-hosts, we have tweaked the topics that we have talked about based on your input in these polls. So thank everybody so much for doing these.
Roger?
Uh-huh.
if I could just, say one more thing. Andy Pettit asked a really good question, and
Okay.
we see this all the time. Just a quick overview. When you're comparing two drivers with the time variance on the bottom, this is certainly a subject that is may have been covered in a training video, but this is to be expected. The first order of business is GPS start-finish justification. It's super important to make sure that you're talking about the same start-finish. To make sure that you're not gaining speed and losing speed at every slowing. That's something that Roger talks a lot about, and I know it's really important. But I would I do think that's worthy and definitely interested in
Very
seeing.
good. Thanks for the question, Andy. Maybe we'll do maybe Peter and I can hit on that in an upcoming with a little bit more detail. Certainly, it can be a shift in the start finish line coordinate of the start finish line position, but sometimes depending on who you're one driver on a team versus another, maybe one guy is charging the corners and he's slow off the corners all the time. So it's a tough one just to say without looking at the data which of those problems we can help you fix. So I appreciate you guys taking the time on that poll. Let me end it and let me share it with everybody and give you an idea of what we see when we get done as well. And data analysis, it's what I see in my on-site seminars that we've been doing for so many years, and we're seeing it here. Data analysis being number one at 77% of you asking that hey, let's continue on with some data analysis topics. And we're so blessed here at AIM to have these co-hosts come in here. And they're talking about, sometimes it's close to the same kind of analysis topics, but because they are hitting it from different angles and different approaches, Peter with the driver coaching side and some of the other ones with a different, just a different way of saying sometimes even the same thing, there is such value to having our different hosts here in the analysis side. Number two in that list, configurations. 49%. The calibrations are in there, track maps still in there. So maybe we start to think about understanding and doing another one on track maps. We hit kind of the track maps in the AIM universe, but we did not get into how to build one and how to resegment it fully. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. So ECU protocols and CAN products and CAN expansions are there as well. So pretty cool. Thank you very much for that. Let's jump that out of the way so we can see the rest of our screen. The next slide is, and Peter, if you see any other ones you might want to hit on, we'll talk about it after the training and support. Maybe we'll answer a couple more if they see that. All of these webinars, including a bunch of videos done previous to these webinars, are all being stored out at our LearnFast e-training video site on YouTube. There's the address. If you just go to YouTube and type in AIM data, you'll find us. Or there, certainly there's links in all of the emails you're getting from these webinars as well. But as soon as we finish this, one of my first tasks is to get it up onto the YouTube site. It's usually up there within an hour or so of the finish here, and then we work on all the links that we've talked about, all the questions and answers and all that stuff all get added to the description box as we have as we get them done. So keep that in mind. The customer support, we're here for you. Peter's there for you. All of our AIM dealers are really good about this kind of stuff as well. But hopefully we'll be seeing you at the track soon. I know this coming weekend is the first event that's in my area up at Pacific Raceways outside of Seattle. Thinking about heading up to that and getting out a little bit, but we'll see. Our folks are here available for you. 800 number that is there on your screen. Take a look at that. Give us a holler if you need anything. We are so looking forward to our vans and our great tech staff being out at the racetracks with you coming up soon. So looking forward to that. The next webinar, and then I'll go back to Peter if he has any other comments. But the next webinar is going to be one that I've gotten actually a lot of emails on. It fits into some of the stuff we're seeing in the polling and as well as the emails that are coming to us. Custom sensors. The ability of Race Studio 3 to take data from a fuel level gauge or other sources of millivolts and creating a sensor that once you get the data, it just looks like fuel level in gallons or liters or whatever it happens to be. That's one example, and we're going to tweak that. Matt is going to work with us, and we're going to chat about not only custom sensors but also calibrating your current sensors, the three most important one, three most common ones, steering, throttle, and suspension sensors. Those all have a calibration routine, and they kind of fit into this custom sensor thought process. So we're going to work on having it where we can actually show you a piece of hardware and Race Studio 3 at the same time, and we're actually going to go through how to set them up and then how to calibrate them on top of it. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to Matt joining us again next Tuesday on the 26th of May. Same time as what we've been doing here. So Peter, have you seen any, there's been a couple more in there. I haven't had a chance to read them. Is there anything else you'd like to add in closing or in questions and answers?
Well, it's fun. We could keep on and on and on, but it's wonderful. I think the community has really grown, and I am sure we're going to actually get to a couple of these questions in future webinars.
Perfect. I thank everybody. Let me show the last slide here. I mentioned earlier that I was going to show you some contact information for later. We had those math channels that I mentioned I would be willing to send out to anybody that drops me an email again. There's my email address, not the one that I started to give earlier. And there's Peter's contact information as well. And go ahead and drop me a note. I had, again, about 50 of the people wanted to see the email stuff yesterday, the math channel emails sent to them after Tuesday. So looking forward to chatting with some of you again. Again, thank you, Peter. Thank you to the fellows in the back that have been answering your questions like crazy. I see that they answered about 25 of them and just in the question and answer box, plus a ton in the chat box as well. Thanks to everybody. We're going to end this one now. I look forward to seeing you guys all next Tuesday for the next one, and we're going to do again the rest of May and all through June. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.